I grew up without a dad. I know I've mentioned that before. A lot of you guys know that. But one cool thing is that, the church I grew up in, they knew that I didn't have a dad. And so one day, a bunch of the dads of the church were having a fishing trip with their sons, and they invited me to come with. It's pretty nice. I really like that they did that. And we go on this fishing trip, and I had never gone fishing before. And so they're trying to show me this, and they hand me the worm, and they say, yeah, you got to hold this. And I said, I'm really supposed to touch that thing? He said, yeah, not only are you going to touch it, but you got to put the hook through it. So I'm like, okay, how do I do that? He says, right through the head, I think, from what I remember. And I'm like, am I doing it right? He's like, no, you got to hold it like this. I'm like this? He says, no, like this. And I say, sorry. He says, no, don't worry. Don't have to say sorry. Just do it like this. I said, I'm sorry. He said, okay, well, how about you put the hook on like that? And I'm like this. And he said, no, like this. I mean, it went on for about 3.5 hours, this loop of, I'm sorry, you don't have to say sorry. Do it like this. No, not like that, like this. And we went back to the campsite, and I did not catch a fish. And the whole time, I must have said sorry about 1,000 times. And half of those times were because he said, don't say sorry. I said, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I think my brain broke that day. And, a few years go by, and fast forward, I'm the youth pastor at our old church, and we hire a consultant to come in, and he's telling us we got to cast vision for a new future. And people didn't like it. They had problems. And he said the number one thing you're not supposed to say is sorry. And so we spent about an hour during this consulting meeting trying to come up with other responses we can say besides sorry. He said, no, don't say sorry because that comes across weak. That comes across you're not excited about the future. And so don't ever apologize for the good things that are going to happen here in the church. So he taught us how to not say sorry. And so I grew up, not having a dad meant I didn't know what it meant to be a man. But one thing I did learn was you don't say sorry. Except every wedding I've been to, there's an 80-year-old man at some point who comes on up, and he's been married for about 120 years, and he comes up, he says, the one advice I have for all of you is you need to learn 2 words. I'm sorry. I'm like, what is it? What does it mean to be a man? Is a man bold and strong and courageous and doesn't need to apologize because he's so decisive and confident and a leader? Or is being a man being sensitive, humble, willing to admit to your mistakes, willing to listen to another person? What is it? I really have no idea. I still don't know what it's like to be a man, the man I'm supposed to be. And I think I'm not alone. I think there's a lot of guys out there who we've been given different messages of this is what you're supposed to be. So this pastor, his name is Chase. So Pastor Chase writes this book called The 5 Masculine Instincts. And I want to talk about it. How he starts off is by saying that men eat meat. And he says this is really controversial, but I'm just going to say it. Men eat meat. On average, men will eat 58% more meat than women. That's a lot of meat. Men tend not to be vegetarians. There are more women who become vegetarians than men. So the question is, why is that? Is that because men biologically are supposed to eat more meat than women? That's just what it means to be a man? Or is there something about our world and our society and our culture that says men should eat meat? What is it? What does it mean to be a man? So I know I'm speaking to a room, majority women, actually. And so as I share about the 5 masculine instincts, I want to ask you to think about a man in your life. Could be a spouse, could be a dad, could be any significant man in your life, and be thinking about, are these 5 instincts something that would describe him? And to the men in the room, I want to ask you to think about, do these describe me? And what might go wrong with these? So Pastor Chase calls them instincts because they're kind of naturally built into a lot of us. At least 1, 2, 3, or 4 of them tend to exist in men. And he says they're more like tools. They're like a knife. They can save a life or they can take a life. They can be used for good or evil. And so the point of these instincts is to know, how am I using them? And am I using them for good? And where am I letting this tool get out of hand? Okay, so I listened to this pastor, and he was able to describe different Bible characters and how they use these different instincts, and I was so fascinated by how he saw these all across. And for me, I really do want to know, like, what does it mean to be a man? I think in our culture, in our world, we're really asking the question of identity. Who am I? And knowing something about what it means to be a man could help us a bit. So we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna step into this, but we're going to stay a little bit skeptic, okay? We're not just going to take it hook, line, and sinker. He even admits he takes these 5 from a famous Shakespearean poem about the stages of life, which Shakespeare actually gives 7, and so he shaved off the 2 on either end, and he said, these 5 I tend to see as the 5 masculine instincts. Ready for the first one? Okay, here's the first one. Sarcasm. So, the very first brothers in the Bible, Cain and Abel. Eben last week talked about Cain and Abel. And Cain got jealous of Abel because God loved his sacrifice better than Cain's. God says, watch out. Sin is crouching at the door. It wants to devour you. Sin is pictured as this lion that wants to tear Cain apart. Cain doesn't listen to God. Instead, he thought it'd be easier to take his brother out and kill him. He kills his brother Abel. God comes up to him and says, hey, have you seen Abel lately? And Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? He deflects with sarcasm. And I don't know about you, but I could think of a person or two. Maybe you have a significant guy in your life, man in your life, who can never be serious, who uses sarcasm to deflect. Maybe uses sarcasm as a way of dealing with his anger because it's a little more appropriate. Sometimes we don't know what to do with the complex emotions, and so we're just constantly telling jokes, or we're trying to be indirect about things, passive-aggressive. We'll lean in sarcasm, and Cain did that. And you know what happened to Cain is he was sent off to this land that was called wandering. And so sarcasm sometimes leaves us wandering about who we are and what we're doing. And so we got to deal with that. Now what I'm saying, you're thinking of this and you're like, well, sarcasm isn't a tool. Sarcasm is bad. Always bad. Sometimes it's okay. At least the Bible portrays it as a good thing every so often. Elijah used sarcasm. I love this story. He was up against the prophets of Baal, and it was a show-off. And he sends fire down from heaven, but the prophets of Baal, they couldn't get their gods to do it. So Baal wasn't doing anything. He says, what, is Baal like stuck in the bathroom or something? He uses sarcasm as a way of honoring God and showing just how precious God is. He uses sarcasm. So sometimes there's a place for it, but most of the time, our sarcasm isn't doing anyone around us any favors. So is sarcasm something that you deal with? Is sarcasm something that maybe the guys around you deal with and could use a little better? Okay, so sarcasm is one of them. Adventure is the next one. Number 2 is adventure. Samson represents adventure. Samson was a very unique character. He was a Nazirite, and as long as he didn't shave off his hair, he would have this superhuman strength. And so Samson never seemed to be content with his place in life. He kind of wanted to dabble with what the Philistines were up to. And so he was always going on these adventures, and he was always getting into trouble. And the picture there was every time he adventured out, every time he schemed, every time he got out what he wanted, he became less of himself. Until he died a tragic death. Eventually the Philistines capture him. They gouge out his eyes. They shave off his hair. And he doesn't have his strength anymore. He's tied up to this pillar. He prays to God, God, give me strength just one more time. God grants him his request, and he knocks down the pillar, kills everybody. That's how Samson goes. The problem is our culture will say adventure is how you find yourself. Like you got to take a year off. You got to relax. You got to enjoy yourself. You got to find yourself through adventure. There's an instinct inside of me, at least, that says I've got to have more fun. If I take a day off and I'm being lazy, I remember Courtney a few weeks ago said, you need a potato day. I'm like, what in the world, a potato day? She says, you need a potato day. You need a day to yourself where you're not accomplishing anything. You know, you really need to rest. To me, sometimes I have a potato day and I feel awful about myself. I'm like, I need to adventure. I need to do something with this energy. And that's a good thing sometimes. Sometimes it can be dangerous. Here's when it becomes really dangerous. It's when we cannot commit. Because the best things in life come with a cost. The best things in life come with the cost of committing. Are you so adventurous that you have a hard time staying? Or maybe you want to be more adventurous. Adventure as a masculine instinct. Let's look at the next one. Next one is ambition. And the Bible character is Moses. Moses shows ambition. If you're familiar with the story of Moses, you know that Moses was a Hebrew who grew up in an Egyptian household when the Hebrews were enslaved to the Egyptians. So, Egypt is this big, massive world power. And here is Moses living in Pharaoh's household, growing up in Pharaoh's household, watching the Hebrews being abused and oppressed year after year after year, enslaved. And he devises a plan. He says, I'm going to do something about it. So one day, he sees that an Egyptian master driver is mistreating his slave, his Hebrew slave, and he kills the Egyptian. The next day comes by, he sees these two Hebrew slaves arguing with each other. He says, you guys are brothers. Why don't you get along? And one of them says to him, what, are you going to kill me? Now, immediately then he realizes his plan of rescuing the Hebrews out of slavery isn't going to work. He doesn't even have the support of the Hebrews themselves. So he goes into hiding. He's 40 years old, and he runs. And for 40 years, he's in the wilderness, not accomplishing that much. He's a shepherd. He went from royalty to a shepherd. One day, God calls him from a burning bush. He says, I'm going to use you, Moses. Yes, you, Moses, to rescue Israel. And Moses says, who am I? See, the problem with ambition is so many times ambition can either, if we win and succeed, our heads get really big and we think that it's all because of us. And we get the superiority complex and we get this high out of success and accomplishment. But when we fail, we can be so crushed and devastated. I'll tell you guys, I have failed a lot. And I have been so depressed over it. Because ambition meant too much to me. So Moses does, in fact, lead Israel out of slavery into the wilderness. For 40 years, he's leading them through the wilderness, and they are driving him crazy. One day, he strikes a rock to get water out of it, and he's mad, and he's not doing it the way God said to do it. And he's saying this complaint like, what are you guys doing? I brought you out of Egypt, and so he's not giving God the credit like God should be given credit. He's kind of leaning back on his ambition again, and because of that, God punishes them. They're right at the edge of the promised land, and Moses isn't allowed to go in. And so Moses dies. He goes up on a mountain. He looks on that promised land. His life's work, not being able to finish it. There's something beautiful about that image. I was thinking about that. Because on the one hand, yes, it is a failure of Moses's. It's a character flaw of Moses. On the other hand, he accomplished a lot. And he was very, very significant. And it tells me a little bit of, it's okay if your checklist is left undone. There's something reassuring to me about that. Ambition. Ambition. Where are you with ambition? You know, so many families are really devastated when dad's not around because work is dominating his mind and heart and time. Because ambition. I think of A.W. Tozer was known for a huge, massive ministry, made a huge, huge difference. Well, he died and his wife remarried, and I heard this from another pastor. Apparently, someone asked his wife about the new husband, and she said, "I really like this guy. He's actually around. You know, Tozer, I knew he loved God. I wasn't sure he loved me." Ambition. Gotta watch out for that one. Gets a lot of guys. Next one is reputation. There's a lot of guys who care about their reputation. I know I can be really concerned about my reputation. I know at the start of the service when we noticed that it was going to be a smaller group than last week, I was worried about, what are people going to think about me? What are people going to think about me as a pastor? Reputation. David had a bit of ups and downs with his reputation. David starts out really well. He notices that this giant Philistine, Goliath, is mocking God and mocking God's people. And nobody's willing to stand up to Goliath. David says, "I've stood up to bears and lions. I can take this guy on." Saul says, "Are you kidding me?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Well, you're going to need my armor." He says, "Absolutely not. None of that fits me. I'm a little guy." He didn't care about the way he looked. What he cared about was God's reputation. He fought Goliath. He killed Goliath, something nobody else was willing to do. He becomes king. David gets a little comfortable. While everyone else is at war, he stays back. He sees a pretty girl bathing on the rooftop. He has sex. And then his worst nightmare happens. Finds out she's pregnant. So he devises this whole plan to get her husband back off because her husband was out at war. Get him back to spend a night with his wife. Husband says, "I can't do that while my men are fighting out there. I can't see my wife just yet." So David says, "What am I going to do? They're going to know it was me." So what he does is he organizes the army in such a way that husband is right in the front lines, virtually murdering the husband to cover up his sin. He was so lost in this. He was so unaware of what he was doing to himself and to the people around him that when God spoke to his friend Nathan, said, "Nathan," David was crushed. It dawned on him. Here's the cool thing about David, though. David repents. He admits to his mistake. Man, it's hard to see a world leader admitting to his mistake. And yet David is very public with it. He confesses. On one occasion, he's out with his team, and one guy jeers at him. He says, "Look at this David guy. He has blood on his hands." And the team comes up to David and says, "Should we do something about them? We can't let him talk about you like that." And David says, "Well, he might be right." Humility. My goodness. If anyone was able to scrub history and that story from history, it would have been the king. It would have been David. Do you know how many problems and weaknesses of world leaders throughout history that have been lost to history because it's the victors who tell history? And yet David let the story of his failure go on. He realized that it's not all about his reputation. It's not all about our reputations. That was number 4. Number 5, this is the last one here, is apathy. Abraham is about apathy. Abraham was called by God, and he started out really well. God says to him, I want you to leave house and family and everything, go to a land you've never been to. Abraham is faithful. He listens to God. 2 thumbs up to Abraham. He does great. And then Abraham doesn't do so good with the conflict. He goes into some cities. He says, hey, Sarah, don't let them know you're my wife. Tell them you're my sister. Well, that gets everybody mad at him. And the truth comes out, and it's not good. Then he goes into another city. He says, okay, I need you to say that you're my sister, not my wife. He says it again. He doesn't want to deal with the conflict. He's apathetic. On one occasion, God had promised a son to Abraham. He doesn't get the son right away. And so him and his wife devise a plan. Well, you have a maidservant. You could use her. Despicable, faithless, ruthless, awful action, abusive action. She has a son. Later on, his wife, Sarah, has a son. They get angry. Basically, the 2 wives have some conflict. If you've ever seen Sister Wives, it happens. There's conflict there, and Sarah says, send her away. Man. And Abraham, he does it. He's apathetic. He's not willing to stick up for Hagar. Instead, he's willing to send her out to her death. Not good. The younger Abraham was willing to argue with God and to fight for Lot and to fight for people and to negotiate with God and try to rescue people. But as Abraham gets older, he's getting more apathetic. He doesn't seem to have fight in him anymore. He doesn't seem to have the energy in him anymore to stand up for people. Instead, he just lets her off. Big failure on Abraham's part. Well, the very next chapter, what we have is a story of God testing Abraham. And at this point, Abraham has everything he's needed. He is in his retirement years. He has the money. He has the family. Everything he's ever wanted is his. And God says, I need you to go up on that mountain and make a sacrifice. Abraham says, fine, of course. He says, I want you to bring your only son, Isaac, or the one son that really counted to him, which is kind of messed up, Isaac. And he brings Isaac. He says, I want Isaac to be the sacrifice. And Abraham says, your will be done, God. And of course God stopped him because God isn't all about a human sacrifice. That was common in those days. That was a normal thing in those days. But God says, I'm not like those other gods asking for human sacrifices. And yet he did test his faithfulness. And in the end, Abraham's story was one of fighting against apathy. Let me ask you, do you ever deal with apathy? Do you ever just get so tired and you know that you could fight for more and you can work toward more, you just don't want to. You don't have it in you. So those are the 5 instincts. Sarcasm, adventure, ambition, reputation, and apathy. I want you guys to think, first question I have, are these masculine instincts, or could we just call them human instincts? Are there separate feminine instincts? Let me ask you women here. This is not rhetorical. Does this list apply to women too? What do you think? Yes or no? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Like, no, this is definitely men. What do you guys think? It's both. Who thinks it's both? Raise your hand. Oh, would we add Any to make them feminine? Are there feminine instincts that should be added to this list? Are there any of the 5 that are just manly instincts or masculine instincts that women don't deal with the same? Or, it's all generalizations, but would you say any are more men? Or is this all just, cultural, like we just throw it in there? Cool, good. So this sermon applies to everybody. Good. Then my question to you is this last one here is, which one are you and why would you lie? This is the barometer. Let's say you lied. Now, you're an honest person. You're a good person who deserves trust. But every once in a while, you're going to tell a little lie. Why? Why lie? Are you lying because it could be fun and you like the drama? Is it adventure? Are you lying to kind of jab at somebody? Is it sarcasm? Like somebody you don't like, someone who really has it coming? Are you lying because if you told the truth, that might hurt your advancement? Or it might hurt your reputation, to be honest, and so you fudge a lie? Are you lying because the energy it would take to be honest is just too much, and you're being apathetic? Of the 5 instincts, what do you have to work on? And maybe the question is, which one is the reason why you would find yourself telling a lie? I'll tell you just this week. No, it was last week. We were at the pool. We went to Centennial Pool over there, and we bumped into some people on the way out. And this was after we went to an event, and I went to this event, and I said, man, Hannah, I just did not get it with this speaker. I did not like the speaker. It was just a weird speaker. I wasn't really sure about it. And we're leaving this pool, and these people come up to me who were at that event. They said, wasn't that speaker amazing? And I may or may not have been dishonest with them. Said, yeah, he was great. He was awesome. I'm thinking, why did I lie right now? Why did I lie? I could have said, wasn't my favorite. It's okay. I think it was the reputation. I was so worried about what they would think of me. What about you? Don't ask who it is. Don't. Maybe. Could have been a little bit of apathy. Or sometimes it's a judgment call. Like, I don't need to cause a problem right now. Yes. Yeah. Everyone's nodding. Like, yes. The right thing to do is always to lie. No! Lying's bad, guys! It's like the easy way out. It's like a cheat code. It's the cheat code. Maybe.
To go against the grain and say, he didn't like it, he's a bad guy. It wasn't worth them putting up with that.
Yeah, that's true.
I've been in situations like that. I think we all have sometimes.
We all have.
Yes.
So, Emma, of the 5 instincts, why would you lie?
I guess I did it like you did. I guess because reputation.
Reputation, yeah.
Their feelings, I guess, too.
Don't want to hurt their feelings. That's good, yeah. Absolutely. Let's pray. Father God, we pray that you would help us with these instincts that really, they're human instincts. So each one of us, men and women, help us to be able to follow you, to serve people, to love people with the things inside of us that drive us. Give us the strength and the wisdom to direct them in such a way that we are living the way you've called us to live, the way we've been created to live. We love you, Jesus. Amen.